Well, welcome everybody to Hire's very first TA Tech Teardown webinar. I'm Ben Payton. I'm going to be the host of this series. Over the past few years, TA technology has grown massively, and it's really hard for professionals like me, like you, to keep on top of what the best tools out there are. Hire have decided to do the research for you and bring not only the best tools, but also, I guess, some of the best software as well for you to consider when you're thinking about how to build out your TA toolkit. By joining the TA Tech Teardown series, easy for me to say, you'll see live interactive demos from really great products. You'll also get an opportunity to ask questions to the leaders of these excellent companies without having to go through the full sales process. Our guest company today is Metaview. We're chatting with the longtime Hire supporter and friend of Metaview, CEO Siadhal, to get his take on why all TA teams should be using AI to optimize their interview process. And we're also joined by Matthias, who's the Global Director of TA at Emnify. Matthias and his team of recruiters have been working with Metaview since 2022, so early adopters, and we'll talk about how their team work with the software day to day and the benefits that they've found of using it. What you will get from the session as viewers, you'll be able to see how the software works, how it integrates with your ATS. You'll be able to see how TA teams can benefit from using interview transcription software, and you'll also be able to see the unique selling points of Metaview. Hopefully everyone in here in the webinar knows what Metaview is already, or has done a little bit of research. But if not, Metaview is the AI assistant that helps teams eradicate admin and toil from their hiring process. It completely removes the need for recruiters to take notes during their most important conversations, because their AI has decided to take the world-class recruiting notes for you. Metaview records, transcribes, and automatically summarizes recruiting calls, whether it's intakes, screens, interviews, or debriefs, so you can save time focusing on what really matters, and what really matters is making the decisions based on what actually happened during interviews. As a Hire member, you can access an extended 1-month free trial of Metaview and book in a personalized onboarding session with Metaview's product experts to ensure that you really get the best out of the platform. And we'll share a link with you at the end on how you can get started with Metaview. But for now, that's enough from me. We'll get straight into the product with Siadhal and Matthias for some quick intros, and then we'll get stuck into a live demo. Please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A as we go along, and we'll do our best to answer them all in real time. If not, there is time at the end for us to do a little bit of a Q&A. So yeah, without further ado, over to you, Siadhal.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ben. Big fan of Hire community and fan of Talentful as well. So pumped to be the first on the TA Tech Teardown. I'm Siadhal. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO here at Metaview. Co-founded Metaview in 2018, so quite a while ago now, and always with this belief that the data from within interviews was incredibly important, both affected massively the outcome of hiring processes, but was also very opaque and very unreliably gathered. The data from it was very unreliably gathered. So we've been working on trying to solve that for a while. Late 2022, early 2023 was a real shift for almost the global technology scene. You know, when GPT 3.5 was made available to companies like ours, suddenly our ability to help our customers make sense of these conversations at scale fundamentally changed. And it's been a real game changer for us as a company, and also by proxy, of course, and you know, more consequentially, hopefully a real game changer for our customers as well, because yeah, some of the things we can do now are just pretty magical, and looking forward to sharing that and jumping into any questions folks have. Just so you know, by way of background, so before starting Metaview, I was on the product team at Uber in 2017, 2018, so when we were growing incredibly fast, and that's really where I started to get this itch that I wanted to scratch around, hey, can we do something to really improve the accuracy and the reliability and the transparency of the interview process? A lot of lessons learned the hard way since then, you know, coming as an outsider to the game of recruitment, but obviously a good few years and meeting folks like Matthias and others over those years have mean that I feel pretty attuned now to how to make the difference you folks want.
Yeah, cool. Leads to me. My name is Matthias, Senior Director of TA and Employer Branding of Amplify. I've been a user since November 2022 of Metaview. I'm really happy. I've seen a lot of evolution and involvements there. For us, it's really important since we are a Series B deep tech startup located Berlin, Germany, but also operating globally, that technology that helps us to enable us to achieve our goals, create a candidate experience that matters, an amazing candidate experience, but also really help us to be data driven and also be evidence based on our decision making, because for every hire that we make, it has an impact in our organization. Yeah, we are not 20,000 people, we are just 200, and it really makes a difference if you have an idea of, hey, we have some evidence of making the right decisions, not the wrong decisions. And this is why I would love to share a little bit more my input and my insights there as a user here.
Awesome. Thanks very much for those intros. Siadhal, do you want to share your screen and take it away with the product?
Yeah, let's do it. So I'll jump into a brief demo. I'll try and keep to sort of the main point so we can leave as much time for discussion as possible. If you are interested in seeing more, obviously, head over to our website, metaview.ai, or ping me on LinkedIn, or whatever is easiest for you. Let me know. But let's dive in. So Ben gave a great introduction about what we're about. But just to sort of reiterate, Metaview is an AI note taker built specifically for recruiting. Now, you'll probably be aware of a bunch of AI note takers out there. They're getting more and more common. What's really differentiated about Metaview, and we'll see that in the product in a second, is we're building a note taker that is especially empathetic to the types of decisions and the workflows that exist around recruiting. And that ends up actually making all the difference in terms of the extent to which you can rely on this product and the level of impact it can have for you. But first of all, I think one thing that to really stress is, even though Metaview ends up being so much more than a note taker, the reality is note taking during interviews sucks even more than you think. And that's really for two primary reasons. One, frantic, feverish note taking during candidate calls doesn't make for a great conversation. It's really hard to do both of those things at once, influence and motivate or understand the candidate, as well as write down everything they're saying, is incredibly tough. No one can do it. And secondly, when you do that, you still spend a bunch of time having to clean up those notes, which often leads to, late nights before bed, trying to clean up all of your notes and get them into the ATS or whatever it might be, so that you don't start the next day already behind. So solving note taking in itself is a really important part of what Metaview does. And so let's look at how Metaview does that. Ben, just quick check. Is the screen size sort of okay for you? Is it sort of coming through?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Perfect for me. Yeah.
So I interviewed this candidate recently. During the call itself, I was totally focused on getting to know James, who's the candidate here, rather than on taking notes, because I really trust Metaview to do that for me. Metaview pulls out the question that I asked, understands semantically what this question is getting at, and then bullet point summarizes the most important information the candidate shared in response to that question, bullet point summary of the answer. So essentially, this is step one for us. How can we build a note taker that is so attuned to the recruiting use case that actually, for me as the person running the interview, I don't need to worry about taking notes anymore at all. And Metaview really does that job exceptionally well. These are still my notes. I can decide to sort of tell Metaview, actually, hey, these are part of the same question. I'm going to drag and drop and please put that all together for me. Or if I want to add some nuance, I can add some nuance here. These are still my notes. Metaview has just done the heavy lifting. A real sort of, I guess, like a valve, an unlock moment for a lot of recruiters we hear. Now, the reality is, taking notes during the interview is one thing, but a lot of the time, I need to either put this information into my applicant tracking system in a different structure than the conversation played out, or inform my hiring manager about the candidate. And I don't want to tell them everything we spoke about. I just want to focus on the things that I think really matter to them. That usually takes me 20 or 30 minutes to sort of clean up my notes. But with Metaview, I can do both of those things in just a few clicks. So first of all, let me show you how we can instruct Metaview to rewrite my notes for a different persona. So in this case, I'm going to pull up the template section. I'm going to click the summary for hiring manager template, and I'm going to tell Metaview to use this template. And what that is doing is instructing the AI to rewrite the notes for the hiring manager persona and the things that I've previously told Metaview this hiring manager is interested in, which means I tell Metaview once, this is how I want my notes, and then forevermore, Metaview will take the notes in that exact format for me. So in this case, the high-level experience, some example projects, and some conflict and collaboration. A few other topics too. Now, just to sort of make it really clear what's happening here, we've gone from a linear, this is what happened in the conversation, to pulling together different parts of the conversation and bucketing it into themes in just a single click, saving me tons of time on doing that myself. I can also populate the scorecard with this. So we're an Ashby house, so we use Ashby as our ATS. So I'm going to pull up the scorecard here. What Metaview does is it pulls in the feedback form from within Ashby, goes through the fields, and actually pre-types for me certain information that I can include in the scorecard. Again, I can add more information and then submit feedback directly from here. So a really amazing way to, one, reduce the workload on your hiring teams in terms of, filling in scorecards and saving you a bunch of time of following them up and maybe nagging them about doing so. And two, scorecard quality massively increases because it's actually inherently based on what was actually discussed, as opposed to sort of overly focused on the subjective aspects of the call. There's a bunch more, but I'm conscious of time, so I think let's keep moving forward. But essentially, note taking is step one. Make it so that you don't have to worry about notes during the interview. Make it so that you can clean up and process your notes afterwards in seconds, as opposed to minutes or hours. What's really interesting though is it turns out that note taking is actually so much more than just that. Really, what we've realized note taking is it's data extraction, right? You are sitting there on a call with a candidate and you are doing two jobs. You're engaging with them, and your job is to sort of be the receptor and extract the data and capture it. Turns out AI is far better at that second thing. It's not better at the first thing, but it is better at the second thing, the data extraction. And actually, when you have the extraction handled by AI, the interview process is an incredibly data-rich part of your hiring pipeline, and it means you can start to do some pretty amazing things, which we'll jump into now. So let's imagine this candidate, I'm pretty pumped about them. I put them through to the next stage in the ATS. I tell the hiring manager, actually, I really think we should speak to this candidate ASAP. They're hot property. They review my summarized notes, say great information, doesn't mention anything about their machine learning experience. And I don't know if we spoke about this I didn't ask a particular question about this, but I think that they did mention they have some machine learning experience. I just want to validate that. So I'm going to ask Metaview here, just using this natural language, the assistant section here. Does the candidate have machine learning experience? And so I can, again, very ChatGPT-esque, using natural language, ask Metaview a question, and it will go through the interview and find me context on that. So in this case, the candidate worked on a project at Google to improve search using machine learning. Great, so they do have some exposure to those techniques. Now, hiring decisions are really important. They're really important to your company, also very important to the life of the candidate. So it's important we get this information right. In this case, you can see, and in all cases, our assistant will always provide a citation. It will tell you where it got this information from. And from there, I can jump to the verbatim to that moment in the actual interview itself and maybe watch that back. Or if I would like to, I can highlight the section. Let's get this right. And say create snippet. And essentially share this media, share this 1-minute clip with the hiring manager so they can get comfortable about their experience with this technology. It was pretty delightful here as well. Metaview just came up with the title of the snippet for me because it understood the context of the conversation and creates that for me. So that's really cool. Again, massively just improving the leverage I get or the value I get out of the data I'm capturing in terms of making decisions. Last thing to show you, and then we'd love to hear Matthias's take and jump into any questions, is what we call the candidate review. So our most powerful implementations of Metaview, often we start with the recruiting team, and a lot of the focus is on efficiency. Can we get a higher performing, more productive recruiting team because we're not wasting as much time on taking notes and we're extracting better data from our calls. Our most powerful implementations like we do with Emnify, we end up rolling out to the whole company, because of course hiring is a team sport. And as a recruiter, you're so reliant on the players on the team who are downstream of you, but you of course don't have a ton of authority over them. So your ability to actually influence that downstream process is quite low. One of the reasons it hasn't got a lot of attention actually, in previous decades. What you can see here is a case where the candidate, Terry Carlson, has reached the end of their interview process. They've got a bunch of interviews that have been captured. Every single one of them is on Metaview and has been chaptered here by our AI. I can watch back any video I want here, all in this one UI. We've also pulled in all of the scorecards from Ashby, also works with Greenhouse, Lever, Workable, a lot of other folks as well. So I can see what all the interviewers thought of the candidate. And not only that, our AI has also summarized the key takeaways from the scorecards. So what was Lawson's opinion on the candidate in a nutshell, we've pulled out as well, again with citations. So this is the best place to go, whether it's before your debrief, during your debrief, after your debrief, to get a sense for who is this candidate and do I want to hire them?
And just to clarify there as well, the scorecard and the rating is done by the ATS, not through Metaview. Is that correct?
Correct. So one sort of general theme, which maybe we'll get into because I think it's a really interesting topic, is Metaview doesn't do any of the judgments. We're just really trying to pull together the information that matters. And obviously we think the information from the conversation is part of that, but there's other things that matter too. Like, what did your colleagues think of them? How did they rate them against the feedback form is important. So we pull that in from, in this case, Ashby or the ATS. Now, what's really magical about this is because I have the candidate all in one place, let's imagine we're really excited about this candidate. We want to make them an offer. I like to personalize either my talk track or my email to let them know that we want them to join us. So I'm going to ask Metaview, what are the candidates' main priorities for their next role? And so I want to lean into what I know the candidate's main priorities are for their next role. But the reality is we've spent 7 hours with this candidate. I'm not going to listen back to every single interview to establish this. Luckily, I've got this super intelligent AI who can do that in a few seconds for me. So what Metaview is doing now is going through each interview and pulling out for me all of the main priorities the candidate shared. Again, citing them from which interview they were in. So the recruiter phone screen, the coding interview, because they mentioned it throughout the pipeline, right? It wasn't just when I asked them, hey, what are you motivated by, that they answered it. They actually revealed this throughout the interview. And so I can do a much better job now at putting together a really compelling offer letter or an offer talk track because I have this information. You can even ask Metaview to, great, we want to make an offer. Can you help me with a short offer letter? And Metaview will go ahead and start to put together these an idea for an offer letter. Again, we recommend human in the loop on this. You don't want to just hit send as soon as Metaview produces this, but getting you off that blank canvas from knowing, hey, how do I want to sort of go about convincing this candidate to join? Metaview is a really great sparring partner for you because it has access to this really compelling data. So yeah, we'll wait for that to sort of generate, but that's Metaview, as he said, really focused on making sure, yeah, there you go, right, putting together the offer sort of script for me there. Yeah, that will help me with my offer letter creation.
Right. And we've had a question in the chat from Nick, who's asked if Metaview has multi-language capabilities, and especially when there are different languages happening in real time.
Yes. So moving, as in always developing, Metaview's live in about 40 languages, so which is really great. Really powerful, especially if you have multiple offices and maybe your Brazil office does their interviews in Portuguese, but is expected to input the data into the ATS in English, then that's like a real lifesaver for those recruiters who are being sort of forced to do that job, that translation job. Even when you're dealing with some multiple languages within an individual interview, we're pretty good at dealing with that too. But yeah, it's available in a whole host of languages.
Great. And I guess one of the key metrics when hiring is a time to align with the hiring team. Is there a way that you can use the data from Metaview to understand what successful candidates are saying, what kind of experience you should be looking for?
Great sort of like a topic for us. Exactly the type of thing that we think is, I guess, not talked about enough, right? I think that's like the key from a hiring manager's perspective. My confidence in the alignment I have with my recruiter is almost, it's not really a metric because it's hard to measure, but it's almost the most important thing. And actually, when you speak to a lot of recruiting leaders, what the thing that they really want is, even if we don't make the hires at the time we expect, if we feel like, hey, there's great coordination, great collaboration, great calibration between the recruiter and the hiring manager, you're usually feeling pretty happy. Anyway, to answer your question, there's not sort of like a metric that Metaview spits out to sort of like help with this or anything like this, but I would essentially look at that as if you want to use Metaview to help you with that, then it's amazing for you. So what I mean by that is, if you're a recruiter, you're using Metaview and you say, hey, hiring manager, I really want to start to capture your calls too, because I think that will really help me start to understand what you're seeing in candidates that I'm failing to pick up for you in the screen. And it's more about giving the recruiter the leverage and having the tools at their disposal to solve that problem themselves, more than it is our AI sort of noticing for you, hey, you seem to be doing X or Y. That may come in future, but right now it's much more about empowerment of the actual recruiter and the hiring manager to sort of have that higher fidelity collaboration as opposed to us solving it for you.
Great. Even just having hiring managers not have to wait for about a week for them to type up notes is a massive game changer.
Yeah, massively.
Great. Matthias, over to you.
Yeah, I think for us it's really interesting having used the tool for such a while. We recently pulled some survey from users in our company and realized that 85% of the Metaview users is actually hiring managers or interviewers. Yeah, it's not so much the recruiting team, which is great if you think about, you want to optimize, you want to save time, you want to focus on efficiency. But funny enough, this was not the reason why I took the chance with Metaview, because for us it was very much like, at that time we did not have hiring or interviewer training. The hiring culture was not the most robust or most sophisticated. And how do you get a little bit of a read of what is going on in all of those interviews? Siadhal mentioned this so nicely, that it's not so much changing the hiring managers or interviewers first, but it's understanding what's going on. So I recently had somebody onboarding in my team, and that person just took some time and watched the hiring manager interviews or interviewer interviews, and they got a really good sense of what is the hiring culture actually like. Yeah, how are interviewers asking questions? How much do they pitch? How much do they assess? Right? We have, for example, seen, especially in tech, that they were also obsessed about candidate experience, that they pitched more the company than they really assessed candidates, right? And so to really understand what's going on is something that I think was for us very helpful. At the same time, we have also seen that people, once they get an understanding of what it is that's happening, I mean, sometimes you feel a little bit of sense of reservation. Oh, I'm being recorded on my interviews, right? I am from a German company, Berlin, Germany. GDPR is a big thing, and people are so, especially the Germans, are so much obsessed with data and then not being so transparent. But we really managed, because of also this, this opportunity with the multi-language approach, right? This is huge, right? We have in some areas of the business where we are just looking for German speakers, some German-speaking interviews, right? And then what do we do if it switches suddenly to English, or we have a candidate that needs both English speaking and German speaking? How do you deal with this, right? And so Metaview helped here as well, especially when what Siadhal said in the interview notes, right? How do you mix this up? How can you even, I tried this really, it was really interesting. It was a German interview, and I tried to watch it in English. Yeah, and so you can switch the languages, at least the transcript, and then listen to it. And I think this is something that helps also people when you have to work in multiple various languages and do different talent markets. It's really, really important to understand and have everybody on the same side. And I think also last one that I really enjoy doing is this AI assistant. So really start using in a ChatGPT way now with real company data, and really play around with this. Is something that everybody was dreaming about, but not so many people did, right? We always played with ChatGPT, but we never used or uploaded company data in here. So really now having company data and assessment data, and having all of the interviews recorded. Imagine just what Siadhal showed on one interview. You have this done with all the interviews, and then you just go there and say, look, what we need to do in order to make a decision are these 4 or 5 criteria. Let's just go there, compare candidates based on that. And even I remember one thing that Siadhal mentioned as well. One of my recruiters mentioned in a small talk, I had a conversation, not even asking questions. And then Metaview only focus on the questions that I ask on interviews, so it can differentiate between, is this a small talk or is this an interview question? And she said, oh, I wasn't captured there. So let me just go on the AI assistant and try to get the data back, the information that somehow wasn't captured, and it worked. So that was actually quite cool as well. So I think my everybody who's using Metaview in the business at the minute says, I don't want to do any interviews without Metaview, because after you've done it, right, you don't want to change and go back to the old school way. And I think that says it all, because, you know, everybody has different topics here, but it's a time saver. It helps to understand and dive deeper into your decision making and fosters decision making and alignment. So depending a little bit where you are with your hiring managers and interviewers in the different parts of the organization, you can tackle it on multiple different areas.
Great. And having 85% of your users being interviewers and hiring managers, is a really cool stat as well. Out of curiosity, because I know people love like routine, they like to know what they know. You introduce a new software and they go, no, thank you very much, I'm quite happy. How did the implementation of Metaview go with the, not just with the recruiters who I think can see the benefit, but with the hiring community as well?
Yeah, I think I started as well with the recruiters first, right? Because if they don't believe it, if they don't see the benefit, then how good they pitch it to their business, right? And we did this for a couple of months. Now, the next part was for people who are very busy, and especially the businesses most of the time very busy, right? Having back-to-back meetings, having no time to prepare interviews. Once they understood the benefit of it, so for example, sales, we had some people who are like, oh, this is similar to Gong. This actually makes sense. I'm all in. Love this. Do this more, right? So that was helpful. And they were totally on board. Also, engineers they got it. Yeah, for them, this, you know, typing notes is a nightmare for them. You know, they want to focus on something and then get it over with and done with. And they, of course, with GPT and the whole rise of AI, it was definitely something they fall in love with easily. I think some of the areas, and we also did not make it mandatory, by the way. So in terms of when you talk about implementation strategy here, we're not forcing everybody to use it. Yeah, it's just something that I would set the recruiter who owns or runs the relationship with Metaview a little bit of, hey, let's look at the user adoption over time to really make this happen, and then look at how can you explain people the benefit of that tool. And this means internal communication. This means how do we do some interviews, some snippets, some showcasing some features. It's literally like selling this, but doing this inside job, right, for the business. Something we are focusing on, and that works quite well. What else was there? I think the fun part was that after a certain period of time, a tipping point, I would say 2 to 3 months, people were actually requesting it, asking for it, right? And it's a word of mouth phenomena. So everybody who's used it is like, if you have hiring manager first and you buy them, then it's easy to win their teams over, because they'd be like, look, conquered you, I get the idea. I would love to also view, I would also love to coach you for people to really get better in interviewing, right? And we haven't talked about the whole training aspect, right? If you go down there and figure out how the business is doing this, how can they get better? What does that mean for interview trainings? What does that mean for other sessions here? So there's a lot along that line that actually can help this to make this more fruitful. And yeah, for us, it became something that was pretty straightforward once people got the hang of it, yeah, and understanding.
Cool. And Siadhal, back to you. Do you offer like any implementation support? Do you have pre-made training decks that if attendees here started using Metaview tomorrow, they could send around to their hiring teams straight away?
Yeah, it's sort of short answer is yes. The way that it typically works is we have sort of two ways that you can onboard to Metaview. We do actually have a lot of self-serve. So occasionally it might happen whereby maybe there's like a pocket of recruiters, maybe not even the full recruiting team, just a handful of them who decide, you know what, I'm gonna try this out. And it's very much a self-serve. Go to the website, start a free trial. You'll probably receive some emails saying, hey, let's meet. We want to make sure you get the most out of it. But you don't have to. You can, you know, obviously we try and build the product in an intuitive way such that you don't have to meet with someone if you don't want to. But at the point that you're starting to think about rolling it out to the hiring team, it usually makes sense for us to engage with each other and us to help with that rollout, just because we've seen some of the corner cases of how that can go, or where you can hit snagging points. So yeah, we have a bunch of what we call onboarding specialists, actually predominantly former recruiters who work with the recruiting functions of our customers to roll out the product. That's very important. I would actually say the number one most important decision that we've made that helps with rollout is building the product with the end user front of mind. So what I mean by that is the people who we think, you know, I love Matthias, but he's actually not who I think about every day. I think about every day recruiters and the hiring managers. Those are the sort of the main personas that we care about. And at some point, you know, maybe I'd like to sort of start to think about Matthias every day instead. But the reason we took this approach is because we started with the conviction, and I think over time have really proven to ourselves that for a product like this, which on the surface can seem quite intrusive, frankly, like it's going to record my calls, it's really vital that end users are bought in. Now, that's not true with a lot of other tech that you might buy as a TA leader. It's very rarely actually intrusive, especially beyond the recruiting team. Very rarely do you buy something that is going to intrude on the hiring managers, the VP of engineering, the VP of sales, and these folks. So what we find is that it's really important to actually build the features that those people want. Get right of admission into this new data asset, which TA leaders are responsible for, which is what's happening in the interviews. But the way you get right of admission is to solve their problems, and then sort of downstream think about how can we leverage this data so that, you know, you can run an even tighter ship.
Amazing. And Matthias mentioned really briefly GDPR. I think that's on the top of most people's minds at the moment, or has been for the last few years. Are there any privacy or security considerations that new users need to consider when starting with Metaview?
Yeah, as in worth being aware of. There's no work that one needs to do. Essentially, the sort of the obviously there's GDPR is a pretty thick set of regulations. The ones that are really important when you think about recording conversations are participants in these conversations, both interviewers and candidates, have the right to be informed. So they need to be really made aware that this is happening. Metaview, again, handles that out of the box in a number of ways. They have the right to object, so without it affecting their candidacy as well. And of course, the right to be forgotten and right of access as well. So all of those things are considered and sort of catered to on the platform. Worth people being aware that those are things they should care about. I think in this case, there's obviously a lot of talk about GDPR and pros and cons. In this case, I think GDPR is like very sensible. Even without that regulation, it's the sort of approach that most people would take, right? I'm going to let this person know this is what we're doing. So it's not really a thing, if you know what I mean. It's worth being aware of the sort of the language maybe, or worth being aware that, you know, worth testing us on it and asking the questions basically, just to make sure we're all clear on it. But really, if you do the human thing, you're also satisfying the regulation. Right.
And have you noticed the clients that you have, the companies that you work with, do they mainly sit in the startup space, or do you work with enterprise businesses as well?
We have a growing enterprise side to our business, but it's predominantly, I think AI in general right now is sort of, we're past the innovator stage. I think like we're now firmly in the early adopter bucket and maybe starting to make that jump to mainstream. And so really, I think that's the main characteristic that matters. And that tends to also, you can push maybe sort of size a company against that. Yeah, we work with, you know, I think our largest customer is around, you know, 10,000 people, so a really large organization. But a lot of them are in that sort of 200 to 1,000 scaling mid-market companies. I mean, obviously worth pointing out, there's just more companies that satisfy that definition too. So it's not really a big factor for us. We focus on people who are really trying to elevate either the productivity of their recruiting team. So you could be a large company that has a really stretched recruiting team. You could be a small company that has a really stretched recruiting team, or folks that are really trying to level up the quality of their decision-making in the hiring process and their transparency into the process. And that tends to sort of span the gamut of companies. We also have lots of boutique-y, very small, hedge funds, for example, who are not large companies, but again, take this incredibly seriously.
And I'm guessing for the different size of companies, there's a different pricing structure. Are you happy to talk quickly about the tiering of products that you offer and different?
Well, it's not really tiering, so it's actually really it's quite flat and transparent. So you can go to our website, metaview.ai/pricing. You'll see the per seat pricing. Anyone can get started after their free trial. There's always a free trial. Even folks who want to buy straight away, we tell them to do a free trial. But after the free trial, you can either adopt Metaview on a per seat basis. So that's usually what you do if you want to roll out just your recruiting team. You'll say, well, I've got 20 recruiters. I'm going to buy 20 recruiter seats. And it's obviously therefore very transparent pricing. It's $50 per month per recruiter. When at the point you come to decide, hey, I want to roll this out for my company, we then move away from the per seat or per license model, because of course, let's imagine, Ben, you're a hiring manager. You might only make one hire this year. You might make that hire within the first quarter and then not use the product again for the next 9 months. And we don't want to charge you for a seat for the whole year, because that just doesn't make sense. So in that world, we move to hiring volume. So then it becomes very sort of elastic based on your hiring volume expectations for the year ahead. And so of course, tends to be that larger companies hire more, so they pay more. But if you're a smaller company growing rapidly, we really think the value of Metaview is in helping you do that, hire better people quicker. And so that's the sort of the value that we want you to attach to Metaview. And so the pricing is based on that.
Awesome. And we've had a question from Leandro, who's asked, is it possible to switch seats between hiring teams when someone's active and then inactive?
Yeah, it is. But I would also, that's why we sort of have this custom unlimited pricing structure. When you move beyond the recruiting team, it often makes sense just to basically have a conversation with a member of our team, so that you can get actually a much more efficient price. Rather than having to buy a bunch of seats and sort of juggle them and move them around, we can come up with something that essentially just bakes that into the price in the first place.
Got a few more questions coming through now. So the question is, what are your plans for the EU AI Act or Local Law 144 in New York, for example? And how does independent auditing happen?
Yeah, so we are not we're not a decision-making tool. Metaview does nothing that relates to the sort of the audit trail for a decision on a candidate. Metaview is not on. Yeah, we've engaged with consultants to understand our position in relation to those regulations, and essentially we are not the type of tool that regulation is aimed at. That regulation is aimed at tools that are essentially either filtering candidates out for you, like saying, hey, don't speak to this person, don't even look at the CV because your AI has looked at it and you shouldn't, or are doing something else sort of further downstream towards that actually affects the decision making. Metaview is not that. Humans make the decision, or our platform is built such that humans are empowered to make the decision, just with better sort of access to data.
And there's one more question come through, which is, any plans for a live AI interview assistant anytime soon? Yeah,
it's a really, really interesting topic we talk about a bunch. And just maybe if the language is not clear to everyone, so essentially something that helps you during the actual interview itself. Right now, the way Metaview works is the interview itself is just as it always was, no difference at all. And then after the interview, we help you a bunch with your, writing up your notes and these sorts of things and making decisions. Yeah, watch this space on it. I think that the thing that we want to be really careful of is the bar is really high. If you're going to be present during an interview and sort of trying to live coach someone on how to run that interview, the bar is really high for how accurate and timely you have to be. And so there are many things that are possible now. Is it possible to do an amazing job at this live in interview assistance? We're right now pretty dubious just with the experiments that we've run. And there are actually some very large and successful sales intelligence tools that have experimented with this functionality of like live coaching the salesperson on how to sell. And we know a bunch of the folks at those companies because we don't compete with them. We're friendly with them, and they've ended up turning some of those features off because the sellers found it too distracting. And I think they can get away with it because sellers are very motivated to hone their selling game and therefore continue to use this tool. But that's the type of thing that's really, we want to avoid at all costs. We don't want someone like Matthias to say, great, my recruiters love it. Now I'm going to roll it out to the engineering and sales and marketing teams. And then, you know, our AI do things that actually don't make sense in the heat of the moment, in a live situation, because that's really bad for our customers' credibility. So we think the dynamics are a bit different. I'm not saying we won't do it, because we will, basically, but it's about getting it right.
Cool. Absolutely. We have no more questions. If anyone does have any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A section. What I'll do in the meantime is share my screen quickly, just to run through again. I know I mentioned at the start that we have a special offer in partnership with Metaview and Hire for a 1-month free trial. If you go onto the website metaview.ai/hire, you can access that, and you'll also be invited to an onboarding session, which will just mean you can maximize the efficiency of that month, and you can really hit the ground running with the work that you're doing, and gain maximum value out of it. We have one more question, and from JJ: what is truly unique with Metaview compared to other interview intel platforms?
So it all stems from the end user focus that I mentioned. So if you think about, you know, what's going to sustain that differentiation over time, it's going to be because we really focus on the actual recruiters and the interviewers and the things that matter to them in their day-to-day. How that manifests itself in differentiated features right now is, one is the chat assistant. That's not something any other platforms have out there. That's both in terms of actually existing, but also the quality of the answers the chat assistant provides, and the fact that every single answer it provides also has provenance and a citation. There's a bunch of work that goes into making that accurate. That is something that makes a ton of sense when you're trying to turbocharge the sort of the understanding and the confidence of the individual who's doing the hiring, but doesn't make sense actually if you're sort of solving some other problems that are still important that relate to interviewing. And then the other, and I guess more underlying differentiation, is just the faithfulness and the accuracy and the relevance of the notes themselves. So that is something that any company that's in conversation synthesis, so one of the things that we spend a lot of our engineering effort on, or product effort on, is our conversation synthesis engine. What that essentially means is understanding what a question is trying to get out of a candidate, understanding what parts of the conversation the candidate are most important that relate to that answer. That whole the whole fine-tuning that occurs there is something that we're highly confident we're best in class. And so it's not necessarily a differentiator from a, hey, we can check this box, but this other company can't, or something like this. It's much more about the quality of what is essentially the foundation of this whole product category, which is, are you pulling out the most important information from the conversation automatically?
I have actually lost the ability to see any. Oh no, here we go. So there's no one more question through. It's just a thanks from JJ. Great. Well, what we could do is
just I noticed on the document that we have, there's a pre-webinar question about learning about the debrief features. Which I'm happy to speak to. So just I'll read out the question. I'd love to learn more about the debrief features. This is something our ATS greenhouse is lacking in, and we're looking for a better way to save our conversations. So during this session, I focused a lot on interviews. Interviews aren't the only conversation that matters in recruiting. There's a lot of other really high leverage conversations. An intake meeting that you have with the hiring manager is really important. Debriefs, offer calls, these are all really high leverage conversations, and we have different models, different conversation synthesis models. Essentially means we output different type of notes for each of those conversations, and debriefs are an amazing one because that's a lot of the time where the decision either gets made or heavily influenced. And so you can, Metaview will join your debriefs as well, and will literally lay out the pros and cons that were discussed by who and based on what automatically for you. So yeah, really, really delightful thing. And actually you talked about what's a good way to roll out to the rest of the company. We found that it's more anecdotal, but we found that in a few cases has been a great way to roll out Metaview is well, listen, I'm the recruiter. I don't want to be the note taker, the sort of, during this debrief. I want to be an active participant and influencing and making sure this is a great conversation. So I'm bringing my AI assistant to this call. And then guess what? That means all of you folks that are involved in the debrief get your notes too. And suddenly you're opening up the mind or the eyes of the other people in the hiring team about what they should be using. So it's actually, it's really good for our growth actually when we want to expand with a customer, but also very good for talent leaders, because it means some of the sell is happening without you having to really sort of, pound your fist on the table.
Awesome. I'd love to continue this conversation long into the evening, but I'm aware that we set a 45-minute time, and we're about 45 minutes in now. If people want to continue the conversation with Siadhal, with Matthias, I guess LinkedIn or through Hire are the most logical ways. We've also recorded this session, and the recording will be at hirehq.com. That's a new content hub for Hire that will have all the webinars, all the podcasts on there. So if you're wanting people in your team to see about Metaview, do that. Also, please do sign up with metaview.ai/hire. And massive thanks, Siadhal and Matthias, for being part of this, the first TA Tech Teardown. Super informative, such a good product. It's going to really have a big influence on a lot of people's day-to-day recruiting, as well as the quality of hiring managers and the quality of candidate experience in the companies that you work with. So I think everyone at Hire is really excited to see where you take this, and hopefully you found this an interesting conversation as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ben.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.